Sounds good.
All right, take it away, Russ.
All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everyone see the slides okay? Can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Sorry, I was thumbs upping you. Isn't it obnoxious when they don't talk? All right, leave your mic.
Yeah, it's like you gotta like look the camera and back. All right, take it away. So today we're going to talk about site mapping and wireframing, and how you take, what could be like quite an abstract idea from a client as to, I want a new website, make it happen. How you kind of take that from just an idea or them saying that, or, hopefully something a little bit more than that, but not always, as a lot of you guys will know, how you can take that and turn it into like a finished product and kind of shepherd it through the progress, working through edits, working through, working with developers, working with graphic designers, all those kinds of people to create a finished product that everyone's proud of and does good things for the business. So super brief overview, what we're going to talk about. So website creation 101. So we'll go through that pretty briefly because I'm pretty sure that almost everyone on this call will be pretty familiar with what the process looks like, what you need to know, how you have to manage different stakeholders, all that different kind of, sorts of things like that. So we'll talk through that briefly. Then we'll go into site mapping. So we're going to look first at what exactly we mean when we say site map, because it's a word that has kind of a couple of different meanings depending on the context in which you use it. Then we're going to look at why it's important and then how you do it. And we're going to look at a real example of a site map that we've pulled together for one of our clients, and then compare that to what their website actually looks like. So you guys can see kind of how it translates from the site map, which is like a Google sheet, into the reality of the website. Then we're going to go on to look at copy wireframing, which is basically when you put together a structure for the website and kind of plug in copy and instructions for developers and designers about what you want things to look like. So we're going to go through what you have to include in that process, how you should structure it, a little bit about keys to writing good web copy, but that could be a whole training session in itself, or 6 weeks worth of training sessions, right? So we're not going to focus on that too much. And then just finish up with some final thoughts. And yeah, at any time, feel free to jump in, interrupt with questions. Ideally, I won't be talking at you for an hour straight because that's no fun for you guys. It's probably not much fun for me either. So I'll pause and ask for questions and feedback. And if you guys have anything to add, please feel free to jump in and share with the wider group as well. All right, so any questions before we kick off, or are we good to go?
Good to go.
All right, so website creation 101. So if you're starting, let's say a common scenario is a client comes to you and maybe they're a new client or maybe they're an existing client, and they say, oh, we want to do a new website, the one we have isn't doing great for SEO, or we don't like the tone, or we have, we want to do like a rebranding and, have a new design and all that kind of stuff. There's like I think you need to level set with them and kind of really understand what their goals are for the project, what the role is of their website in their business, what they want people to do. So before you kind of dive into site maps and copy wireframes and coming up with catchy taglines and headlines and call to actions and all that kind of stuff, you really need to level set with your client, or same applies if you're doing this internally as well. So ask if this is an entirely new website, if they want to start from scratch, or if they have an existing website that they're kind of married to the structure of, so they can't change the way the website is laid out. They might even not be able to change the way that it's designed, right? They might be stuck with a certain theme because they don't have the developmental resources to, completely transform their website and do something radical. So you kind of need to ask that question to understand the scope of the project, right? So is this a complete rewrite, tear it down to the studs, build it up again from scratch, or is this more kind of going in and applying a new coat of paint to what they already have there? And then the second thing I would like to understand is what's driving the decision for them to make this change, right? So is this coming from a place of, I have a problem with my existing site, it doesn't communicate the business, what we do, it doesn't perform, my conversion rates are terrible. Asking those kinds of questions to understand why they want a new website in the first place. And then as an extension to that, what they hope to achieve with a new website, right? So a website, it's not a magic wand, right? It's obviously very important to your business, but if your underlying business is broken, if you have like a poor value proposition, or the rest of your branding and messaging isn't very good, a new website isn't necessarily going to fix all those problems. So you need to understand, kind of big picture, if they have realistic goals and ambitions for the project. And then it's your job to kind of manage those expectations as well of what you'll be able to produce with the new website. You also need to understand what role your website plays in their business. So, this can obviously be very different for different businesses, right? So for one bit, so if you're an e-commerce business, the goal is to sell products on your website. If you are a B2B services business, which, a lot of the clients we work with are, perhaps the goal is to drive leads, or to drive signups to, webinars or events or any of those kinds of things, right? So you need to understand that. And by extension, what are the actions you want people to do when they come to your website? Because when you start designing websites, you can kind of look at them as a journey, right? So you bring someone in, top of funnel, the homepage, you tell them what the business does, you then direct them into maybe a service page that kind of speaks more to their specific problem, and then you direct them to like a lead form. So you need to understand what that desired outcome is before you start, laying out the architecture of the website and the individual pages that go with that. So those are kind of the base questions that you want to ask big picture. There's also some specific things that you need to get, and most of these will come from the client. So you can ask with this during that introductory call. So issues with the current website, client goals and reservations, business model, we kind of talked about all that stuff already. Tech stack, that's going to inform what you can and can't do. So you want to learn what kind of platform their website is built on. Is it built on like a HubSpot? Is it a Squarespace? Is it, in the worst case scenario, like a custom coded site? Because that is, can really affect the scope of what you can do, how you should design the pages, if you're working with kind of predefined modules and all that kind of stuff. So you need to understand how their website is built, how it's performing. And then kind of touching a lot on what we talked about in training last week, right? So we talked about understanding the target audience of the business, understanding the industry, the competitors. So you want to understand all that stuff as well, because obviously that informs, how you go about the project and, how you write the copy and how you lay out the website itself. And then kind of last big picture thing before we get into more specifics are like a sample timeline. So obviously, again, this can vary pretty significantly based on how big or how small the website is, right? So if you have like a small 4-page website, hopefully it doesn't take you 6 weeks plus to rewrite. But if the client is very slow on their end, or if they're nitpicky, or if their developers aren't very good, or if they're under-resourced, it can easily take 6 weeks would be an ambitious timeline in that scenario, right? But it is possible if you work with a good team and you have, aligned expectations. But I would say this timeline is definitely something you need to figure out up front and try and hold different people to. It's very easy for projects like this to kind of get lost with development teams, or kind of get stuck in like this eternal purgatory where you've done your work, you've done your kind of element of the project, but it takes a long time for the rest of the steps to happen. before the website actually goes live. So I would say, try and be ambitious, try and shoot for a shorter timeline, because the sooner you get the website up, the sooner you have that impact on the business that, is the whole reason for this project in the first place. But definitely, be aware that this can take a lot of time, right? These projects can take months and they can drag on for a long time. So it's not kind of a quick flip project, right? This can take quite a long time to come to fruition. So yeah, that's kind of big picture observations. I don't know if anyone has any questions or anything else to add before we dive into the specifics of site mapping. I'll pause for a minute and you guys feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I did have a question. As far as like, key contacts that you're talking to, is there generally like, a role or a group of like departments that you want to be like connecting with on a regular basis when doing this?
I'd say it really depends on the client, right? So in some clients, it will be like the CEO, the president, the owner,
Hmm.
especially in a smaller business, because they'll take real ownership over the website, right? They maybe built the original version themselves. To them, it's like an expression of themselves and their business.
Hmm.
So they can be, quite protective over the website and what you do with it. So it could be that you work directly with them.
Hmm.
More commonly, I'd say it's like marketing managers who've been briefed with, okay, we have a new brand rolling out, or, we want to tweak, various elements of this group of pages, for example.
Hmm.
But yeah, it really does vary based on the client and also the size of the client as well, right? So
Hmm.
a lot of clients might not have internal developers that are going to be working on this. So it could be you talking to the client and then talking to like the client's web design agency. And that
Hmm.
can be, that's another thing that can kind of gum up the process, right? If you have
Hmm.
multiple different people involved from different companies with different agendas. So, there's definitely there can be like politics at play and things you have to manage, but that's true of any kind of big project like this.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Ross, do you ever find, is it easier to bring your own developer with you to projects? Is that a silly question? I don't know, probably.
No, that's not a silly question.
Because then you have that relationship, right? Or is it sometimes easier to work with a brand who already has their own developer in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say if you have a developer and you have a good one and you can trust their output and you know what you're going to get, then definitely work with that person if you can, right? It's there's web design agencies are the same as any other types of agencies, right? There's good ones and there's bad ones, so it could be a lottery for who you work with. And if you get stuck with a bad web design agency, it's difficult to make it a successful project, right? So if you can bring in people who are great, then yeah, absolutely, I think you should do that.
And they typically carry like a portfolio, do they not? I've never actually dealt with developers before. I've been out of that step. So how do you know they're any good?
Yeah, I mean, there's portfolios and stuff like that, but it's like anything, right? You kind of have to talk to people and get a feel for them. If you have that resource, so like we have developers that we work with. So, for example, Winding River Consulting, we work with a lot of accounting firm clients, and we have a developer there who we work with a lot on all of our HubSpot web designs, and he's great. You ask him a question, he hops straight on something. Whereas on the other hand, you can work with a web design agency who the client has brought in, and you can't get a hold of them for like a week or two at a time, right? So it's the same as anything, right? It varies, but if you can find people you trust and bring in, then I would absolutely do that.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Is it often just one last,
Sorry, go ahead.
just it's connecting to what Caitlin's saying.
Mm-hmm.
Is it usually the case that that you're working with a web design firm and you're kind of the copies being outsourced and put on your plate? Or is it like you come into these conversations and sometimes it's kind of the onus is put on you to find the developer?
Again, I would say it depends, right? So
Okay.
I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, but yeah, it depends very much on the client. So sometimes, if they've brought you in to serve in more of a marketing type role than just purely a content writing role,
Yeah.
then sure, the expectation might be on you to provide some of those resources. If, they've brought you in for what's primarily a content role, which is, what we typically get brought in for a lot,
Yeah.
I would say the onus isn't on us, but if you can offer it as a value add, then that's super helpful, right? So, we've been doing this for, years. We know plenty of developers. We can refer people in, we can bring people in. And I think, more generally, like stepping back from this topic for a minute, like if you can do things that are outside the scope of just copywriting or just content writing, I think it makes you much more of an indispensable partner, right? And it adds a lot of value to, your relationship with the client and how they see you. So I think, if you can do that, then yeah, you absolutely should try to do that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so diving into the more technical stuff now. So site mapping, going to start with a definition, right? So a sitemap is a roadmap that outlines every page on the website. The reason that they're important, well, there's multiple reasons they're important, right? So they serve as a project management tool. It's kind of like a central repository of everything that's going on with the website development project. It contains links to all the key pages. You can have your meta descriptions in there. You can specify the site structure in there. It's kind of like a centralized document that everyone can look at and kind of see exactly where the project is at in real time without kind of messing around with like a complicated project management tool. They also clarify the website structure for developers. So we're going to look at this in a minute, but generally we have different layers of pages. So we have like a first layer, a second layer, a third layer. Any more than that is kind of, you'd only do it for a really big site. But that really helps kind of specify the site architecture in a way that's pretty digestible and easy to understand versus using some kind of complex tool to display that. They also clearly document the goals of each page. So every web page that you have on your site should have a goal, right? So what do you want your target customer to do when they come to this page? What purpose does this page serve? And you can include, exactly what those goals are for each page in this sitemap document. And they can also show conversion funnels as well. So I talked about this earlier. Someone might come into your home page and then progress to a service page, then progress to a lead magnet page. And all that time, they're kind of flowing through a conversion funnel, and you can kind of display what that path, what that desired journey looks like in a sitemap. So one kind of caveat is that, when we say sitemap, you might think of like the file that gets submitted to Google to, specify all the web pages that you have and the structure of those. In this sense, this is, it's similar, but it's different, right? So I would think of these more of the sitemaps that we're talking about today as like a visual representation of what the site architecture looks like. It's an internal document. You're not going to share this externally. You're not going to provide it to Google. They probably could be rebranded to something a little bit easier than sitemap. So if anyone has any good name ideas for them, let me know. But they're different to the XML sitemap file that you submit to Google. So moving on, so I'm going to look at this primarily through the lens of B2B websites, right? Because that is the majority of what we deal with here at HireWriter. So if you think about it, most, I guess not all, but most B2B websites pretty much have a very similar layout, right? So they have a home page, they have a service page that summarizes all their services, and then they have individual pages for each different type of service. They might have a section that specifies who they help, the types of clients they work with, the different sectors that they serve, and then they're going to have those sub-pages under that. So these pages on the left are what I'd really call like the core pages of the website. These are almost kind of, you can think about these as the revenue generators, the money pages of the site. These are the ones that are really important for you to nail the copy on. these ones on the right-hand side, so the About Us page, the Careers page, the Resource Center, contact forms, and then the kind of pages you have to have, just like privacy policies and terms of use. They're important. You still have to have them, and you should spend, definitely spend time on them. But they're not going to be as important to the success of this project as your homepage, your services page, and your who we help client profile type pages. So with that, I think we're going to dive in and take a look at a sitemap that we've worked on for one of our clients, and we'll kind of go through it and show you kind of how it looks and how we use that document. So this is a sitemap for a company called USA Home Improvement, and this is their website, right? So they install a variety of different windows, doors, HVAC, roofing, solar panels to residential and commercial customers. So pretty standard services, home services business. We work with a lot of them. Kind of nothing too complicated or insane from a web architecture point of view, which is kind of why we've chosen this as an example to look at. So this is the sitemap for them. So we kind of talked about, I guess first, let's look at each of the columns here, right? So I talked about there being different kind of layers of pages. So you kind of see these tier 1 pages. So home, about, services, financing, contact us, resources. And if you look at the kind of menu here, this is a new version, so this doesn't quite match here, but this is all these kind of layer 1 pages here, right? So home, about, services, financing. From there, you would go into layer 2 pages, which are the pages that you would see in that menu, right? So for example, here we have impact windows, impact doors, air conditioning. These would all be layer 2 pages. And when you click on the Our Services here, you kind of see these layer 2 pages. So these are kind of like those more specific, like service level pages that we talked about as being important for all businesses. And then this website, kind of beyond that, I don't think we have these built yet, but they have third level pages for all these kind of different types of windows and doors and air conditioning units. So they have those that you can click on from each of the individual service pages. So if we were to go into impact windows, and then you could click on the type of window, and you would kind of get more details about their services for installing single hung windows, single hung impact windows, if that's something that you were in the market for. And then in addition to kind of the layout, so this kind of specifies how the site is going to be laid out, right? So you have, from a navigation perspective, you have these kind of like headline pages, you have these second level pages, and then you have these third level pages. And you can kind of apply that idea to all different types of firms, right? So, I do a lot of work with accounting firms, for example. So you could have, your tier 1 page would still be services. Your tier 2 page could be tax, it could be audit, it could be outsourced accounting. Your tier 3 page could be like different types of tax, like business tax or personal tax. It could be different categories of outsourced accounting, like outsourced bookkeeping, outsourced controller services, all those kinds of things. So if you kind of think about it through a lens of how the business is structured and how the business works, I find that that's kind of the best way to structure your website. The other things you're going to have on here are the goal of the page. So, don't spend a ton of time on this. As you can see, this is all very similar, right? So all of these service pages, the goal is for them to drive leads for the company to sell, install, or repair. For things like the homepage, our work, our team, careers, the goals can be much more abstract, right? Not every page has to be focused on generating revenue. Some of them can be, focused more on like telling a story or, introducing people to the brand, or in the sense of the careers page, displaying why your company is such a great place to work. You're also going to include the H1 for that page. So there's different ways to approach H1s, right? You can get smart with them and come up with like snappy taglines. My preference is to keep it simple and really hit on those SEO keywords. So you can see here, for example, the H1s are all very geared for SEO type searches, right? So impact windows, impact doors, air conditioning, jobs, all that kind of stuff. So keep it, I wouldn't overcomplicate this. I like to keep it simple and really kind of focus on those SEO keywords. And you can include links to those SEO keywords in this document just so it kind of helps people see. So you can see here we have a list of keywords that the client can go in and look at and see, okay, this is why they have chosen these H1s, and these are kind of like the search volumes that correspond with that. And from there kind of understand why that's a good fit for the business. And then you can also use this, as I mentioned, as kind of like a project management tool as well, right? So you can have a link to the document where the copy is. And I think Mark wrote the copy for this. I'm sure it's very fun and zingy, but we won't open it up. And these have all the individual copy wireframes in there that we're going to go on to explore next. And then, for a pure project management perspective as well, you can include the status of these various pages, right? So is it in writing? Is it in review by the client? Is it going through graphic design? Is it going through coding? Is it going through staging and QA? Or is the site now live? So you can kind of use this as that central document that keeps everyone on the same page and make sure that everyone is aligned on how the project is going. So that is a sitemap. A couple of key things to bear in mind, and I'll pause and you guys can hit me with any questions. So we kind of talked about pages being organized in tiers. So that's kind of key to this whole concept of the sitemap is those layers and how things are kind of structured. That's really one of the primary functions of this document. So definitely try and lay out your sitemap the same way you would want the navigation of the site to be laid out for your consumers when they come to the site. You also want to be clear on the goal of each page. That's going to be really important when you move on to the copy wireframe and it's time for you to actually write this copy and bring kind of this goal to life. So definitely take note of that here. Do your SEO research, include it in the site map so that people can kind of see exactly why you've chosen to make certain H1 decisions or why you have chosen to structure things in a certain way. And don't be afraid to use this as a project management tool, right? So a website development project like this can be very complicated, right? There's a lot of moving parts. And if you were to sit down and try and build that out in like ClickUp or Monday or some other project management tool, that could take a long time and it could be pretty complicated. Whereas if you can just kind of keep it in this spreadsheet that has pretty much everything high level that everyone needs to know about the project, it simplifies things, it saves time for you, saves time for the client, and kind of helps you spend more time focusing on the stuff that's actually important, right? Which is the structure of the site, the copy that you're going to put up there. So with that, I think let me pause and I'll bring this back up so you guys can have a chance to look at it in a little bit more detail. And then if anyone has any questions or extra thoughts, again, feel free to chime in.
Can I ask kind of a silly question about the way that these docs are all housed in like Google Drive?
Mm-hmm.
Are they all coupled under a folder that is the primary place for this? I wanted to ask Joy this too. I was going to message you, but then I was like, I'll just ask now. Like project management, what does that look like to keep all of these docs in order, organized?
Yeah. Do you want to answer, Ross? Or...
I would say yes, keep them all in the same folder, and then you can answer as well, Joy. But I would say, yeah, you kind of have this as almost like your plan for how things are going to go. You can add like dates for deliverables and all that kind of stuff. You can have links to the copy in here. But yeah, I would house them all in the same folder, but also kind of have this repository of links.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So typically, I mean, we can look in the ClickUp task of how I assigned this out, but basically just like I do with blogs for you guys or any other resources, you'll have a folder. Unless I've written the outline for you, you'll have a folder that you put and create all the documents in. It depends on the level of engagement with the client. In this case, whoever, as you probably know, whoever creates a Google Doc owns that Google Doc and is the only one who has master privileges to all editing history. So in some scenarios where I'm like, this is just going to be a short-term project, I'll request that a client set up their own Google Drive folder, and then we create all the documents in there. So there's never like, oh, well, I can't see what you did back in October, 6 months later, that kind of thing.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
And then, communicating this to a client, like this client manages stuff on Basecamp. So I have to go in and like add whatever. And so I'll just link the whole folder, right? And be like, go find this document in this folder kind of thing, instead of having to get all these individual links.
Yeah, you really want to focus on making it as easy as possible for your clients, right? So like I said, these are complicated projects. If you can make them idiot proof, I'm not saying clients are idiots, but if you can make them simple to understand, then you can eliminate a lot of ambiguity and, make sure that people can find all the documents and, know exactly what they're looking at.
And I think too, like clients, they look at it and they go, okay, I want the end product, not necessarily all of this extra in between that, we need on our end to execute a successful project. So to make this, very streamlined and easy to soak up. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, or should we move on to copy wireframing?
Oh, I did want to mention one thing. I know I'm not supposed to.
All right.
Okay, just really quick. So URL structure, the reason this matters, right? Why are we putting this in tiers? It's not just about navigation and UX. Google will crawl. So this is set in code, the URL structure and how many, branches from the root domain you get is set in code. And it tells Google what order in which to crawl your website every month. So it's always going to crawl those tier 1 pages first. It's always going to crawl the tier 2 pages second. It's always going to crawl, right? So that's why Ross mentioned, like, you rarely go beyond that because you'll exhaust your crawl budget. Google will rarely go beyond 3. So anyway, point being, like, that is prescriptive and directs Google on how to handle and read your website every month. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. Yeah. And on that, I think it's always helpful to steer clients towards, a simple but effective website rather than something that has, all these layers and hundreds of pages. And, that oftentimes adds a lot more confusion than it adds value, right? So simple and well done will always beat out like a heavy, clunky, disorganized website. So it's, definitely optimized for that as you look at these, structures. Okay, so on to copy wireframing, which is a little bit more fun and a little bit more creative than site mapping. So site mapping is almost like the necessary evil that you kind of, you need a map, you need a plan before you go into any project. And, something that you can't escape. It might not be the most fun or most interesting part. But once you do that, you can then move on to the fun part, and the part that, we as writers all like, which is actually writing the copy. And the structure that you're going to use to write this copy is called a copy wireframe. So what is a copy wireframe? A copy wireframe is a visual layout of a web page containing all of the headlines, text, calls to actions, and then you can also include things like images or icons or kind of requests that you would like a developer or a designer to include. So a copy wireframe really kind of lays out all of the key elements that are going to be on your web page. And the way that I always like to think about web pages is that they have these discrete blocks as you go down. So you will have like a hero panel that has like your headline, your subheader, call to action button. You'll have a brief summary of what the web page is about. Maybe this is like 2 or 3 sentences long. Then you can have benefits. You can have social proof, so like client reviews, awards, like a logo soup type section where you include the logos of the companies that you work with. You can have the features of the product. You'll have some form of call to action. You can add a bank of kind of like links to related pages. So you might have, a bank of like 4 small sections that link to other services that the business provides. You can add links to the resource center. So, your most recently published blogs or a white paper or an ebook or something like that. And then I always like to finish with kind of like a softer call to action as well. So for example, sign up for a newsletter instead of, sign up for a consultation call, just to kind of give people those kind of different layers of commitment and, enhance your chances of getting like an email address or something instead of, the visitor to the web page just kind of leaving without giving you anything. So we're going to look at an example copy wireframe, and then we're going to look at how that translates into a finished product. And this page just went live, I think like 2 weeks ago. So this is a pretty fresh example for you guys. So in this case, we're going to look at a company called G Squared Partners. So they provide a range of like outsourced accounting, outsourced CFO services, other financial consulting services to businesses mostly in the Northeast. They work with startups, they work with technology companies, they work with commercial real estate businesses. So really kind of similar to an accounting firm, but not exactly an accounting firm. So we recently rewrote their whole website from scratch. We did the whole site wireframe process, and then we kind of moved into the copy wireframe process. So this is what the copy wireframe looks like for their outsourced CFO page, which is really kind of their most important service, right? They have a lot of clients there. It's, it's a good profitable service for them, and it's something that is important to their business. So you're going to start up here with the top navigation. So this flows from the sitemap, right? So what are those kind of tier 1, layer 1 pages that you want people to be clicking on in the menu? And for these guys, it's services, it's who we help, team, resources, pricing, contact, all those things that we talked about in the last section. You're then going to have, this is going to be like your hero panel up top. So, when you open a website, whatever is above the fold, obviously, I hope that everyone knows, how important that is in capturing people's attention and making them want to scroll down further. I don't know the exact number, but some high percentage of website visitors never get past that. They just kind of see that and then bounce, right? So it's really important that you have like a good headline, a nice design, a good subheader, and a compelling call to action here. Then we're going to go down into the next section, which is going to be like that brief summary that I talked about before. So here you're just going to have, a sentence or two, short, snappy copy, no like walls of text, just kind of explaining what this service is, what the value of it is, who it's for. Then going to flow down into an additional section about benefits, right? So, and as you go down, you're going to mark, so you're going to structure these as you would want to see them structured on the page, right? So up here, we have this is going to be an H1. Here, for example, this is going to be an H2. And you can see, like, just as if you were writing a blog, we've structured that as an H2 here so that it's easy for the developer to understand exactly, how you want your different titles and sections to be coded and how you want Google to understand them. So here you're going to see how we've kind of laid this out, and you kind of see how this translates in a minute, but you can kind of have, okay, these are the benefits. You're going to request that there be an icon inserted here by the designer or by the developer, just to kind of add some visual elements to the website, right? No one wants to read a web page that's a pure wall of text. And then you're going to have like a short, snappy kind of sentence or so here, summarizing what that benefit is. From there, you go into the next section, and I'm sure you guys get it. I don't have to go through every section piece by piece of what's included, but here we have like social proof. Then we have the actual features. So these are kind of the various services that make up the outsourced CFO service. We have our call to action form here. We have links to the other services they offer, right? So in addition to outsourced CFO, they also offer these other services here. So accounting and bookkeeping, sell-side advisory, audit preparation, all that kind of stuff. We have a link to their blog. So this will populate with like the 3 most recent blogs that they've published. And then we have that kind of soft call to action that I talked about as well, like sign up for our newsletter, which is a much softer call to action than we have up here, which is going to be to schedule a call with their team. So you give people that kind of option to at least give you something if they're not at the point where they want to schedule a call. So that's kind of what a copy wireframe looks like. It's pretty simple. Once you build one, it's very easy to kind of replicate this kind of layout across different pages, even across different clients, right? So obviously not every single web page you design will follow this kind of layout that I've used here, and you might have your own layout that you prefer and you think is better, and you should absolutely use that. But once you've kind of built this is a very simple case of just copying this document, getting rid of this text, and adding new text for whatever your next page is, right? So all of these kind of boxes, they're just like tables that you create in the Google Doc, right? So insert table, and then however you want to lay this out. If you want 2 columns, you do this. If you want like a 4-column grid, you do like this, right? It's very very simple, very intuitive. There's no real need for you to mess around in like a complex like graphic design or web design tool. Like this does, I would say, a lot of the, this has the same effect with much less effort, which means that you can, pour your effort into the areas where it matters, which is actually writing the copy, which is what you've been hired to do, right? So keep it simple, don't overcomplicate it. The Google Doc works well. It's easy for everyone to comment on. It's easy for people to share. It's easy to pull up on a screen in a call like this. So, don't overcomplicate things. Keep it easy, and everyone will thank you for that. So, in terms of how this translates, right? So you can kind of see. We'll flip over to the live page. So up here we have kind of the hero panel. It's our CFO services, is our H1. So very much an SEO targeted keyword that we have as our H1 here. Then we have our call to action. Then kind of we'll go down here. We have this kind of like brief spiel about what the company is about and what the service is, and then we'll have the benefits of why they should work with an outsourced CFO. So you kind of see this kind of brief explanation here, and then we go into the benefits of why work with an outsourced CFO. And you can see that we have those icons that we called for in the copy wireframe. They've been added, and it's much better as a result of that, and we kind of have that visual display. Then we go down here, we have our social proof, we have our features. These are all the things that the service can help with. So again, mirroring this exactly, right? So here we have our social proof, here we have our features, we have a call to action form, we have our links to other services. So again, we keep scrolling. We have our links to other services. We have a call to action form. So, not going to mirror it exactly. Things can get changed. I'm sure there were good reasons for this. Sections can get added as well. So this section, for example, is something that we added, after the copy wireframe when the site was staged in HubSpot. We just went in and added this section because the client said they wanted to communicate that, they could operate on a national scale, right? They weren't just limited to a regional market. So, you don't have to go back and do the whole thing in the copy wireframe again. If you have the ability to just add something directly in HubSpot or Squarespace or Webflow or whatever the site is built in, then feel free to do that. If it's simple and easy to do, go ahead and do it. And yeah, that's pretty much it for what a copy wireframe looks like. So just some kind of key things to bear in mind there. So we kind of touched on a few of these already, but every web page is going to have a slightly different structure, right? So don't follow rigidly this like anatomy of the copy wireframe that I've laid out here. This is just what I like to use. You can have your own thing. You can, take this, tweak it, iterate on it, You can change it for different clients, for different businesses, for different pages on the site, right? But I find that this is a pretty solid starting place for like a service-driven B2B web page. Also try to make this idiot-proof. So I said this earlier, right? But you know, the point of the Google Doc is that it's simple. Anyone can log in, anyone can read it. It's pretty visual without being like something that takes up a lot of your time. So people should be able to look at your Google Doc and understand pretty much how the page is going to be laid out in terms of where there's going to be pictures, where there's going to be columns, where there's going to be like grids. You know, that should be relatively easy for people to understand when you look at your copy wireframe. And then, yeah, I mentioned, you know, follow good website writing principles. So, you know, we're not going to talk about this because, you know, all you guys already know how to write websites super well. But, you know, things that I find helpful. So smart brevity. So there's actually a book on this by the founders of Axios. It's a really interesting book. So they talk about how you can communicate these complicated ideas in very kind of brief ways. And when you write web copy, you know, you want to bring smart brevity to that process, right? You want to communicate your point eloquently and thoughtfully, but without, you know, writing like a whole essay or a whole blog article about it. You want to distill these complicated ideas down into 2 or 3 sentences, which kind of leads into the next point. So no walls of text, right? So when you visit a web page, there's nothing worse than seeing, you know, like a big wall of text with no paragraph breaks or, you know, anything like that. It's always kind of preferable to structure things, you know, keep them short and snappy, have plenty of line breaks, keep things conversational if you can. Again, that depends on the client, but, you know, your goal is to engage the reader, not kind of overwhelm them with information. You want to build empathy with your readers. So, you know, talk a lot about pain points, put yourself in their shoes. Ask yourself if, you know, someone was to come to this website that didn't know your business, would they understand what the website did? So, you know, you can grab your spouse, you can grab your friend and say, okay, look at this copy wireframe. What does this business do? Do you get it? Right? Kind of like a helpful sense check, because you can get so deep into these projects if you spend, you know, hours every day or, you know, days every week on these projects. It can kind of, it's easy to kind of lose sight of the bigger picture and kind of get too focused on the details. So don't be afraid to kind of seek out that external kind of gut check on if you're going on the right process. And then, yeah, don't forget your goals either. So be compelling. You want to drive action from the people who read this website. The whole website should build a narrative as to why someone should want to use your service or buy your products, or take whatever action it is that you would like them to take. So don't forget that as you write these copy wireframes. That's pretty much it. So let me just touch on a few final thoughts, and then we're going to have like 5 or 10 minutes left for any kind of questions or discussion, or any kind of, you know, final thoughts from you guys. So my kind of final thoughts on, you know, site mapping, wireframe, how you take things from an idea to reality, kind of broken them down into 4 kind of key points, right? So this is it's a team sport, right? So there's going to be a lot of different players. You've got to work closely with the client. You know, as Sanders kind of pointed out earlier, it might be multiple people within the client. You don't know who that's going to be. It could be developers. It could be, you know, developers within the client, without external to the client. It could be graphic designers. So, you know, there's a whole bunch of people involved in this project, right? It's rarely just you in isolation doing this by yourself. So it's a team sport. You're gonna have to be able to work with people, take constructive criticism, take feedback. You know, there's going to be rounds of edits and all that kind of thing. So just, you know, be prepared for that and be a good teammate. The other thing that I kind of touched on earlier is, you know, if you can, do a little bit more, right? So you always want to be that indispensable partner. You want to be more than just a writer. You want to be like the go-to guy for marketing, for sales, for, you know, whatever it is. So if you want to, you know, you can build pretty nice websites using tools like Webflow, Squarespace. You can use Figma. You don't have to code. I've never written a line of code in my life, and I've built websites in Webflow and Squarespace. I've built, mock-ups in Figma for apps, for websites. It's all drag and drop, very simple. So yeah, don't be afraid to experiment with things like that if your clients would find it helpful, and if it would be a positive for you to kind of invest into that relationship and demonstrate your worth and add extra value. Keep it simple. That's kind of like an ongoing thread through this training. Is focus on make things easy to understand, right? You might be doing this for hours a week, but your client might just check in for like a half-hour meeting every week and want to see where your progress is. So keep it simple for your client. Keep the wireframe simple. Keep the sitemap simple. And keep the website simple as well, right? You don't want a complicated, clunky website. You want a streamlined, efficient website that helps users find answers to their questions and find solutions to their problems. And then finally, this is there's a lot of threading the needle here, right? So this whole process is a balance between SEO and hitting on the right keywords and the right structure. You also have to communicate the value of the business and why a potential customer should transact with you or invest in a relationship with you. And you also have to engage the reader. So this is, there's a lot of kind of balls that you're juggling here. It is difficult and, it takes time to master, but I think it's a very valuable skill. And, it's not one that's going away anytime soon, right? Businesses are always going to need websites. And if you can kind of really master the process of how to lay out a website, how to write a website, and how to shepherd it through the process, then I think, it's something that's going to make you an invaluable partner to businesses that you work with. So that is pretty much everything I have to say on this subject. But if you guys have any questions, happy to hear them. If you think of anything after the call, feel free to ping me on Slack, and I'll drop a link to this deck and the sitemap and the copy wireframe in Slack as well, so you guys have it.
This was tremendously helpful, so thank you.
So good.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so good. And really good timing too. Like, I needed this today.
Okay.
Like actually, as of an hour ago, I needed this today. So thank you.
Joy, I don't know if you have anything to add or anything that I missed or any kind of your
No, I don't think so.
perspective
This
on it.
was fantastic. I think, one of the things that as you move from a novice to being very, very good at something, novices overcomplicate everything and they feel the need to over-explain themselves. And I think as you do this a few times and you go through this process, you learn the value of simplifying. And Ross said it beautifully many times throughout this conversation of just make it simple, make it as simple as possible, show your work, document the research and all of that. But simplicity is beautiful and incredibly powerful, because these are projects that almost always go wrong, that almost always cost a lot more than they should. And it can be incredibly frustrating for people. So if you can just keep a cool head and be as organized as possible and methodically work through what you need to, the kind of editing you're subject to when you write websites is very different than the kind of editing you're subject to when you write blogs, because clients care a lot more about what their website says than what a blog says. So it's definitely a unique dynamic. Not everybody's cut out to be a website writer. I mean, out of all of us, Ross is very, very good. Mark is a very, very good website writer. All of you have done it, and many of you are good at it. But I think you kind of decide, like, if you like this style of writing or not. I personally hate writing websites. So I think it's just kind of depends on, who you are and what your, penchant is. But I think it's very, very valuable for all of us to learn and understand the actual amount of effort and thought that goes into a really good website. So this was great.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I don't think I've talked this much in years. Can't remember the last time I talked for an hour straight. So I'm going to go and have a lie down now. So yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Ross. That was awesome.
Thanks, Ross. Everybody have a good night. Talk soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye, everybody.